What's the number one thing that keeps a man with a steady job broke? It's ignorance. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's ignorance. Cole was 34. He'd been drawing a paycheck since he was 19, and in all that time, he had never once opened his bank history and read it backwards. What he found in there wasn't a mistake. It was something worse than a mistake. Payday at the supply warehouse landed every other Friday, and the deposit always posted overnight. Cole knew this because his phone lit up the ceiling sometime after midnight and woke him up. Every single time. And every single time, he picked it up anyway. Deposit posted. He'd look at the number for a second or two, put the phone face down on the nightstand, and go back to sleep feeling like a man who had money. The feeling rarely survived the weekend. On the paycheck that landed near the first of the month, rent took the biggest bite. Over the next several days came the car payment, the minimum on the credit card, insurance, the phone bill, utilities, and a renter's policy he'd forgotten he'd ever signed up for. By the following week, he was checking the balance before he put gas in the car. He didn't call that a problem. That was just how the month went. One afternoon out on the loading dock, Hank, who'd been running a forklift in that building since before Cole could legally drive, asked him if he wanted in on a lunch order. Cole said he was good, he'd eat at home. Hank squinted at him over the top of his glasses. Payday was Friday. Yeah, Cole said. It was gone before it got here. Hank laughed and went back to the pallet he was breaking down. Cole laughed about half a second late, but that one sat in him funny, all week. It was gone before it got here. He kept turning it over on the drive home, at red lights. Standing in the shower with his forehead against the tile, he'd meant it as a joke. It kept not being one. Cole wasn't reckless with money, not even a little. He lived in a 2-bedroom above a dry cleaner, and the whole place smelled faintly of steam and clean cotton, which he only smelled anymore when somebody else came over. He drove a 2011 Corolla with 190,000 coal on it and a dent in the rear door from a shopping cart in a grocery lot. He didn't gamble. He'd taken exactly 2 vacations as an adult, both of them to see his mother. He bought a used mountain bike off a guy on Craigslist once, and felt guilty about it for a solid month. So the story he told himself was simple, and, well, it's the same story half the country tells itself. I'm not bad with money, I just don't make enough of it. And there was truth in that. Rent had gone up twice in 3 years. Groceries were doing what groceries were doing. Nobody was getting rich stocking commercial heating parts in a warehouse in northern Indiana. If you'd asked Cole to defend himself, he'd have had the answer ready. Then his sister called. Hope was 26 and getting out of a bad living situation into a better one, and she needed $300 for a deposit by Friday. She hated asking. He could hear it in her voice, the way she talked fast to get the question over with. The way she said, I'll pay you back by the 15th, I promise, before he'd said anything at all. He said yes before she finished. Don't worry about the 15th, he said. Just get yourself moved. Then he hung up and sat on the edge of the bed and realized he did not have $300 that wasn't already spoken for. He sent Hope the money from checking anyway. For the rest of that week, gas and groceries went on the credit card. By the next payday, the balance had climbed by almost the same amount he'd sent her. That's the part that got him, not the 300. The fact that a 34-year-old man with a full-time job and 15 years of steady work couldn't help his own sister without borrowing the space from somewhere else. The following Tuesday, it rained all day. Gutters running. the dry cleaner's sign buzzing downstairs, the parking lot behind the building turning into one long puddle. Cole got home, ate standing up at the counter, and opened his banking app to see whether a check had cleared. It had. He should have closed the app. Instead, he scrolled down. Then he kept scrolling. He went back a month, then kept going, until the app ran out of history, and he was looking at charges from the previous October. He was looking for the crime. He was looking for the one enormous stupid thing, the blown weekend, the bad night, the thing he could point at and say, "There, that's what did it." Because if there was one big mistake, then he was a good man who'd made a mistake. And that's a story a person can live with. But there was no crime. Rent, car, card, insurance, gas, groceries, mostly at the cheap place on Coliseum. And then, underneath all of it, the small stuff. Takeout on the nights he came home too worn out to cook, which was most Wednesdays and most Fridays. $12 here, 20-something there. Coffee and a sandwich at the gas station on mornings he left the house late, which was more mornings than he'd have guessed. And the subscriptions. A streaming service he was fairly sure he hadn't opened since spring. A fitness app he'd signed up for in January and used maybe twice. Cloud storage holding photos he had never once gone back to look at. A car wash membership he actually used, so that one was fine. He got up and found a spiral notebook in the junk drawer with the batteries and the takeout menus, sat back down, and did something he had genuinely never done in his adult life. He added up one column, just takeout, 12 months of it, a little over $2,000. He added it again on his phone because he didn't quite believe it. The number barely changed. Not one of those charges had felt like a decision. Every one of them had been too small to argue with. The subscriptions were another 400 or so. He stopped before adding the gas station mornings. Cole was not a dumb man. He'd done his own brake pads in the lot behind the building, with his hands going numb. He caught errors on shipping manifests that everybody else had walked past all morning. He had simply never opened the door and looked in the room. 15 years of paychecks. And he'd been running his entire life on a feeling instead of a number. He knew what came in. After that, it was all guessing. And the money had taken full advantage of that, the way water takes advantage of a crack. The last thing he looked at that night was the credit card balance. $6,400, 300 of which was 2 weeks old. 24.99%. He tapped the payoff estimate, the little line the banks are required to print. At the minimum payment, the balance would follow him well into his 50s. He was 34. He sat there with that longer than he needed to. He'd never thought about it this way before. That number on the card wasn't money. He'd already spent it. It was a couch, a set of tires, a stretch of unemployment 3 years back, and a lot of Wednesday night takeout, and none of it was ever coming home. What that balance actually was a claim. On paychecks he had not earned yet. On shifts he hadn't worked yet. Part of every payday ahead of him already belonged to the card company, and Cole had signed it over one small, painless swipe at a time. He put the pen down and thought, if that's true, then the other direction has to be true too. Every dollar he hung on to was a piece of his own future that still had his name on it. So the obvious move, the one any calculator on earth would have handed him, was to throw every spare dollar at 24.99% until the card was dead, right? He sat with that a while. Then he remembered being 26. He'd tried that once in his 20s. For a few months he sent almost everything he could spare to the card and watched the balance come down. Then the car needed work, A few weeks later, he had a dental bill he hadn't planned for. By Christmas, he was using the card again for things he thought he'd already made room for. The balance climbed right back up. What stayed with him wasn't the number, it was how quickly all that effort had disappeared. After that, he stopped believing that paying the card down was enough, if there was nothing else there when life happened. The math was right. The math had been right at 26 too. But for Cole, paying the card down with nothing behind him had meant every unexpected expense went straight back on it. He'd push the balance down for a few months, watch it climb again, and trust himself a little less the next time. So he didn't make a grand plan. He had one payday coming, and he changed a few things he thought he could actually keep doing. The card got the minimum, plus $40 every month, nothing heroic. Then he set an automatic transfer for $60 a paycheck, scheduled for 6 in the morning, on the day the deposit hit. It moved while he was pressed, asleep, before he saw the balance, before there was anything for him to be strong about. He had to make room for it somewhere. He didn't swear off takeout. He stopped treating Wednesday and Friday like automatic takeout nights and gave himself a couple of them each month instead. He started leaving early enough to skip most of the gas station breakfasts. He canceled the fitness app and the streaming service he'd forgotten about. He kept the car wash. He liked the car wash, and a man is allowed to like something. $60 a paycheck was small, on purpose. Small enough that he'd have been embarrassed to say it out loud at work. That was the point. He needed a number he was certain he could survive on the worst month of the year, because he already knew what happened when he made a plan too ambitious to survive a bad one. Then he renamed the account, not savings. Savings sounded like leftovers, like the money you get to keep if you behaved. He named it Rent for Later, because that's how he decided to treat it, not as whatever survived the month. He put himself on the same list as the landlord and the power company. He wasn't planning to let the account grow forever while a 25% card sat beside it. First, he wanted enough money that the next broken tire or dentist visit didn't have to go back on the card. Once he had that, he could push harder at the balance. And then, for a long stretch, nothing interesting happened at all. Work, home, bed, and again, same apartment above the dry cleaner. Same Corolla with the dented door. Nobody at the warehouse noticed a single thing about him. Nothing about it felt like anything. Most paydays he forgot the transfer had even run. By late fall, the Corolla had started making a faint scrape from the rear and a dull knock over rough pavement. Cole knew enough about cars to know neither sound was good. He also knew the car still started every morning, so he kept telling himself he'd deal with it after Christmas. A few months in, he had to use the account for the first time. A dental bill came up that he hadn't planned for. It wasn't huge, but before this, it would have gone straight on the card. This time, he paid it from Rent for Later. Watching the balance drop bothered him more than he expected. For a moment, it felt like he had undone part of the work. Then he realized, oh, the money had done exactly what it was there to do. The bill was paid, and nothing new had been added to the card. In February, his tax refund came in at about $700. The morning it hit checking, he moved the whole thing over before he had time to get used to seeing it there. In July, he got bumped to shift lead, about $1 more an hour. He raised the automatic transfer from $60 to $100 a paycheck and kept the rest. That was all of it. There was no complicated system underneath. The number went up slowly, and he mostly left it alone. About 16 months later, The Corolla wouldn't start one morning before work. Cole tried the key again. Same click. He called work to say he'd be late, found a ride, and had the car towed to the shop. Sal had it up on the lift by 10. The starter was what had stranded him. But once the car was in the air, Sal found the rest of what Cole had been postponing, a water pump beginning to leak, worn front struts, and rear brakes nearly down to nothing. With parts, labor, fluids, and tax, the estimate came to about $2,600. Cole looked at the paper. Is this thing even worth that? Sal tipped his head. Engine's healthy, body's ugly, but it's solid underneath. Running, you'd still get a few thousand for it. You go buy something else, you're probably signing a loan. That's what I'd be thinking about. The repairs would take a couple of days. Hank gave Cole a ride home from the shop. That evening, Cole looked over the estimate again. $2,600 was more than he'd ever paid for a repair at once. He did what he would have done 16 months ago. He reached for his wallet and put his thumb on the credit card. Then he stopped and opened the banking app instead. Rent for later, a little over $3,200. He read the estimate again, then the balance. Then he moved $2,600 into checking. His hand wasn't steady on the phone. It had taken him more than a year to build that number, and most of it was about to disappear into an old Corolla. Saturday morning, he paid at the counter with his debit card. He drove home with a little over $600 left in rent for later. He didn't feel good. No, he felt like he'd been robbed by his own car. But somewhere on Coliseum, sitting at the light by the on-ramp with the heater finally putting out warm air, he worked it out. A year and a half ago. This exact morning goes on the card. At nearly 25%, putting the repair on the card would have meant adding $2,600 to a balance he'd spent more than a year trying to bring down. He knew how that went. The repair would be over. The car would be running again. But the bill would still be there months later, mixed in with everything he already owed. This time, it was paid. One bad morning would have reached forward into months that hadn't happened yet. Instead, the bad day ended on the day it happened. The saving hadn't made him rich. He was a shift lead in a warehouse with a few $100s left and an old car that finally ran quiet. What it had done was stop one bad morning from becoming another piece of debt that followed him home. And the following Friday, at 6 in the morning while he was asleep, the transfer ran again. $100 into an account named Rent for Later, without asking his permission, and without needing him to be in a good mood about it. That was the point of setting it up that way. He'd taken his own hands off it, because he already knew he was a man who made poor decisions when he was tired. By that fall, the savings account had built back up to around $2,000, and the credit card balance was finally moving in the right direction again. Nothing about his life looked different from the outside, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't losing ground. The next spring, Hope called because her car needed a tire before she could get to work. Cole sent what she needed and went back to what he was doing. He never told her what was different this time. The first time she'd called, helping her had cost him money he hadn't earned yet. This time, it didn't. Something's going to break at your house, too. A transmission, a molar, a water heater, a job. Not this year necessarily, but over a whole life, waiting for the quiet stretch to keep being quiet has never worked out for anybody. And if you're sitting there thinking, I can barely cover what I've already got, that's fair. And $60 isn't nothing to a lot of households. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. So start with the part that's free. Tonight, open the app and scroll back 3 months. No budget, No spreadsheet, no promises to yourself. Just read it the way Cole read it, looking for the big mistake you probably never made. Most people go their entire lives without doing that once, because the money isn't walking out because you're careless. It's walking out because nobody's standing at the door. If there's a number in your account you've been avoiding, put it in the comments. You'd be surprised how much company is down there. I'll see you in the next one.